Okay, everybody, we are live tonight. And actually, we have 2 or 3 guests with us, depending on how you look at it tonight. We have Cathy Jo Nelson, and we have Marcia Mardis, and we have Jane Lofton, whom some of you may know from 515. And so I am going to start the ball rolling with some introductions. I'm actually going to have my friends introduce themselves, but maybe we'll start with Marcia, who I've known for quite some time. And I do know that Marcia is at Florida State. She's an associate professor and assistant dean of interdisciplinary research and education and coordinator of educational informatics. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Not too long ago, I interviewed Marcia for the book that I was writing on social media curation, and I have admired her efforts with OER for some time. And I also know that she's been involved with National Science Foundation work and was involved in the National Science Digital Library. And Marcia, tell us what I've missed about you.
Well, there are periods of rest and complete exhaustion in between those things, but I think we're all there. You know what? I think that's a pretty good kind of. I have been a school librarian. I'm not now, so that gives me some particular insight. And I find that omnivorous approach that you take to school librarianship doesn't stop when you leave the school library. So that's why in the academic realm, they just keep giving you job titles, which are not usually accompanied by raises. But it allows me, though, to never ever to execute, that Linda Langford sense of proper selfishness, right? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know if you know this article. If you haven't read it, Linda Langford is a former school librarian and school library researcher in Australia. And she has this great article, this sort of epic article that she wrote, probably now about 20 years ago, really making the case for, in any kind of library practice, the expectations are so high, the needs are so high, and the rewards are so few that you have to remember why you bother. And the why you bother part should be because it's exciting to make connections between things you're passionate about and things you can make a difference doing every day. So I think actually collection is a really good topic in which to bring that idea together. I teach a collection development course at Florida State University, and it was first a school librarian only course, but now it's for everybody. And I really love seeing how students bring their backgrounds in and lay that on top of the idea of collections and just kind of make it their own. So that is an answer to your question and a whole bunch more.
Great. Okay. And thank you. And also Marcia is on, she has been chairing the standards editorial board, and she'll have a major role in introducing the standards at the AASL National Conference in Phoenix. So we'll all be seeing her there.
Oh, yes.
Yay. And Cathy Jo Nelson, and we've been looking at the standards. We've been looking at the common beliefs and shared foundations this week as well. And Cathy Jo Nelson, I think I met you, Cathy, for the first time face-to-face in DC at an ISTE conference. It may have been Texas. And Cathy is a librarian in South Carolina, and she writes Cathy Jo Nelson's Professional Thoughts blog, and has been actively sharing her practice for years. And she's been an EduBlogs winner, and she's just been out there. And she's a Google certified teacher. Cathy, tell us a little bit more about yourself that I've missed.
I think you pretty much hit it. This year I'm chairing the AASL Social Media Superstars Committee, taking Jane's role. Thank you, Jane, for passing it off. I've been real active in AASL with best websites for teaching and learning for the last couple of years, and then this past year moved over to social media superstars, and just really been enjoying lurking and doing that. I'm the South Carolina Association of School Librarians president this year. Last year I had to plan and implement that conference, so I'm on the affiliate assembly, and I'll be the recording secretary for Region 4 at affiliate assembly at Midwinter at Phoenix and at Midwinter. So that's going to be an interesting role for me to pursue and see if I want to become more active in Region 4 and doing more things with AASL. But I've been enjoying that a lot. This is year 31 for me. Wow. And it may be my last. I don't know. I've told my principal I'm not ready to give it up. I'm not ready to go anywhere or do anything else. But our state is in a situation where those people that are post-retirement are going to take a massive pay cut, and I have told them I will not do it for one dime less. And so I don't know where I'll be next year. I may be in a whole different state for all I know, because I've told my husband, I said, I'm willing to move so that I can continue working, because I'm not ready to quit.
Wow. My goodness.
I know, it's weird. It's a program called Terry. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but after your 28 years, you can retire but continue working, and all of your retirement checks go in a high interest CD, but you still get paid too. And then after that 5 years, you have to leave. Well, they ended the program early, so it ends in 2018. And that's the situation I'm working with right now. So there's lots of chatter amongst legislators and education groups here. And they're saying that they're not going to do it because it's going to cause mass exodus and cause a huge shortage for all certification areas, not just librarians. So we're going to see. I'm optimistic that I'll be right back at Dorman next year, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, I wish you the best on that. And Jane, just briefly, because I think that many of us students know you already. You're teaching 515.
All right, I'm not sure I understood.
I don't think we can hear Jane.
She might be on mute, maybe. It happens to us.
Jane, are you muted? I think she's muted. Are you muted?
Oh, I'm sorry. Here I was talking. I was just saying I'm just delighted to be sitting in because you invited our class, and I'm going to enjoy hearing the discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jane. Thanks for coming. All right, so I've been thinking about collection now for, I don't know, 40-something years, and I don't think about it the same as I used to. And I know, Marcia, you teach a collection development course. How has your thinking about collection changed? And Cathy Jo, feel free to jump in. I posed some questions with my students this week. I dug up an old LMNet post from a couple of years ago saying from a librarian who said that her principal's angry with her because she decided not to buy a print encyclopedia for the first time in a long time. And then I posted that, and it's interesting how the students are arguing about that, or have argued about that over the last year or so. But that's just one of the things that I think we think about, and we're thinking about OER certainly. But what's changing in the way we view collection? Marcia, I think you're talking and you're muted. I know you said brilliant things.
So here's what strikes me, having taught collection development, written a textbook, and done it for so long, that the default mode is still to think about it in terms of books. Why? And it's just what everybody goes to. And I think that I don't know, the tangibility of the physical object, but when I throw out to students, well, you know, but there are other things that you can loan, other things that that you actually, you know, it's sort of that idea of stick a barcode on anything that moves that you're responsible for, and that way you can loan it and hopefully get it back. I mean, I think those of us who've worked in school environments, particularly ones where the classrooms aren't close together, this is something that you know how to do. But I think that as students start the course, they are thinking that it's going to be a course about books, and then halfway through they start realizing, oh, well, collections can include can include equipment, can include, you can be a public librarian and be loaning, I don't know, like trowels and all kinds of tools, lots of different things. But to me, I think in addition to being a little puzzled about the permanence of the book model, mental model, I'm a child of the 70s, and so I can remember checking paintings out at the public library. I can remember collections always having been diverse, but somehow that piece of the offering never really, I guess, had enough profile. So.
Yeah, I've always said that collection is what you point to and make discoverable. And so the idea of even loaning is not necessary, really, in a world where everything can be, kind of discovered and not actually physically borrowed. So right now, what I'm doing is putting a barcode on your heads and making you available as people, right? Because I'm going to tag this, and people can borrow it from this class or classes that come later, and it becomes part of our kind of classroom collection.
Or even that fabulous project, the Human Library, of bringing experts of various kinds to different communities so that people can ask them questions. So sort of a reverse anthropological approach.
Well, I love that. I love it. Yeah, but Cathy, what do you think? You're the
I
only
agree.
one of us currently as a librarian.
I find every year, I've been with the same principal for 6 years, and I find every year that I'm having to justify why I'm spending my book budget on databases every year. And every year the same teachers come to me and say, I was asked again if we really use this, if we really should invest some money in that. And I say, well, I hope you're saying yes, because that's where I want the money to go. And every year, or the last couple of years, we've been evaluated based on our collection age and that kind of stuff. And they've put that on our school report card, the state report card that they do for every school. They have our collection age and our number of volumes of books now included on that state report card. And I'm glad it's there, because I'm glad I have, a slice of that information that represents where I'm at. But it just does not tell the true story of the library. And when I mentioned that to our State Department liaison, she said, well, let's not complain, because we don't want to lose that ground. We just need to, build up that ground. But back to the question at hand, the collection is very fluid, and it's made up of a lot of different things, not just books. But I'm still fighting the people who are looking only at the books on the shelf.
So the metrics are flawed, aren't they?
Yes.
And so we don't necessarily look at, when I had the EBSCO ebook academic collection, that was, I don't know, it was 200,000 ebooks.
Mm-hmm.
And they were scaled in a way that all of my 1,000-something students could borrow at one time. And they did. So the Harold Bloom collections of Hamlet criticism that were formally loaned one volume at a time. If I had 3 volumes of the when they needed, I was lucky.
Right.
Now I could have all of the AP English kids borrow any of those volumes for as long as they wanted. So how do you compare that kind of metric, which was glorious, and I don't even think the students knew they were borrowing books, or using books, or ungluing the collection. So they were ungluing chapters of an anthology, not even realizing what it was they were doing.
You're right.
And having the book itself being borrowed by one person at a time, didn't allow all those chapters to go out. So it was, Hamlet's guilt that was going out to, and all that other rich stuff in that book couldn't be borrowed by anybody. Anyway, that's a diversion. But there are a lot of different issues right now that we're not even thinking about, and nobody's bothering to measure, and we're looking at success by some very, very old standards.
Well, I think you get to the point about, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but the idea of the granularity of information. And so the granularity of information tends to be looked at on basis of, the entire book, right? Like what's in the book is not even looked at as its own standalone kind of information. But what you're talking about, this ungluing, is really talking about granularity. So when we talk about discovery, at what level are we making things discoverable? So that's just another thing that factors in. It's really hard to divorce the collection from the discovery. I'm really glad that you said that, Joyce, and I really like the way that you said it. But I do think that it leads us to confront other kinds of issues.
If I could just come in for just a second, because when you mentioned the EBSCO academic ebook collection, I had that at my library based on your recommendation, Joyce. And I want to say it was probably the best decision I made for research for students. And I know that they were using portions of books that they would not have, many of them would not have been, it's not just that you didn't have enough copies of the print book. A lot of them would, if I put a print book under some of their noses, they didn't want to look in them, but by searching online, they were getting that information and able to access it because EBSCO and other databases had good search engines, built in. We're able to get that information that whether it's crazy or not that they didn't want to look in the print book, they weren't going to get from there, and they were getting it through the electronic collection.
And that brings to mind some other really serious issues in terms of like what we traditionally believe in terms of collection development. And so when I started mentioning how delighted I was with this because it met the popular as well as the long tail needs of my students, folks were asking me, well, aren't you giving up your creativity and your professional decision making in terms of selecting books for your collection? And then I was kind of weighing the price versus, the return on investment. So if I, at my age and my experience in the library, if I started building an ebook collection at $40 a pop for unlimited rights, probably more than that, maybe $75 per book for unlimited rights, versus paying $3,000 a year for the ebook collection of several 100,000 ebooks. I mean, I'd never get to a point where that kind of opportunity would exist. And by the time and all sorts of other interests would pop up. And so I was kind of giving EBSCO the collection development creativity that maybe I would have used, but I couldn't have afforded it. So I struggled with that, and I had trouble arguing with people who traditionally felt that the librarians, one of the librarians' major roles was collection development. But, it's almost like, telling the genie you want 3 more wishes, because in getting that, I was not just getting the stuff I already wanted, I was getting a lot more. And I was selecting that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think the curatorial responsibility or the locus of the curatorial activity has shifted, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because what would be a shame is to have your time and ability to review enough resources to meet your users' information needs, have that be the bottleneck. I mean, that's actually very self-indulgent. Your job as an information professional is to build pathways. What do curators do? They don't just collect paintings that they like. They create pathways through the collections that they have and create experiences for people to enjoy and learn from and be able to recombine and make their own. So I think that actually it requires just as much skill to create those pathways. And in fact, you have to do them a bit more on demand. It's very static to do them the other way. So I'll stop ranting about that. But I just can't even imagine buying, gathering ebooks one by one. That just blows my mind.
People do that. People do that. But then I think the other thing you need to do when your collection gets to a point where it's that big, it's, we just, we discovered we had to add discovery to it. And so how do you make sure that all of these formats are discovered across vendors in a vendor agnostic, without vendor bias? And how do you work with the vendors to make sure that there isn't brand bias and that there are filters that are really usable and possibly above the fold, that users can actually say, I do want a book chapter and I want it written after 2015. And I maybe, if I'm in a middle school, I do care about reading level and I want something I can read. Or I'm an AP history and I want it to be an academic journal, or I want it to be a primary source. And so those filters become really important and in making your discovery, your collection more discoverable. So those are all things that I don't think we thought about in the old days.
I think there are applications for the text that we have to remember that now is not forever. So being a person from the University of Michigan, of course, I was there when the whole Google digitization project started and set off this firestorm of people feeling very uncomfortable about that. But here we are down the road. Things have kind of settled down a little bit. Progress continues. Now, digitized texts aren't just convenient for getting a chapter that you're not physically close to. Now we can use text to do large-scale analysis of things like the first uses of words, things like patterns in language, which
Google has that. It makes, I just shared it with my students this week. I love
beautiful
it.
Tool.
Yeah. Sorry. It's like imagining the concordances from Shakespeare across all, millions of books across a certain amount of years. So when was the phrase World War I first used? I mean, you could actually discover that across the entire Google Books collection and chart it. I think we're maybe getting beyond collection right now.
Well, I think because the overriding point is that librarians too long have been cast in this role as mental hygienists, right? We know what's good for your brain. But the fact of the matter is intellectual endeavors, inquiry, is something that we facilitate, but we can't control. So the example of being able to mine language that way is something that absolutely is within our purview to facilitate. And it's like the conundrum of how you describe a painting, right? So how do you catalog a painting? Well, somebody will see a horse in a field, but somebody else will see, the trees that are off in the distance, and that's what's important to them. Somebody else will see, the types of paints that were used or the type of frame that was used. So, to impose your limits on somebody's inquiry is really, I think, short-sighted. And one of the best contributions we can give to our learners is that, information is designed to be reused and remixed and reconfigured and made your own. And the collection should be a laboratory in which they can do that. As you would say, a kitchen instead of a grocery store.
So in a kitchen, there's also the activity that happens, across the participants. And so, one of the folks that, I'm blanking out on her name, but it'll come back to me. Starts with a T. See, we were talking about this before, Marcia, my memory. Louise, and she's from Canada, and she's been talking about the social catalog. I'm sorry, we lost Kathy Jo, but to what degree do we allow our users to contribute to the folksonomies that are developed around our collection? And we're seeing the Smithsonian and Library of Congress and other digital libraries allowing not just the traditional descriptions of information, but they're inviting people in to describe paintings and images. So, and they might see different things. For instance, I had my students engage in one of the Smithsonian experimental projects in their lab. And there was, and I gave them a bunch of photographs to contribute to. And they were looking at a picture, and the picture happened. I recognized it right away as a bomb shelter, in a home shelter, where somebody had 1950s, early 60s style set up their home with a whole bunch of cans and all sorts of goods. And so while everybody else was labeling it, beans, soup, whatever, I was born in 1954, and I remember this stuff in a different way, bringing my context into the labeling, the description of these items was very different. They saw very little details I did not see, but immediately my big picture view was from a child of the Cold War. And so it was a very different context, but everybody brings something different to these descriptions. And I found that really interesting. And so, do we invite people in to describe our collections?
Gosh, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope so. My class, my collection development course, which is going on simultaneous with this one, they just, their topic last week was community. And so just in what are ways that you can serve your community through your collection. And the topic of cultural competence came up many, many times. And I think that just getting back to, some basic Melville Dewey stuff about libraries should be available to everyone, of course, everyone who is, white and male, but collections or libraries should be available to everyone. One of the reasons why they should be organized in this particular approach is so that when a person learns how to find a book in this library, when he or she goes into another library, they will understand how to find things. And okay, so that's also mired in a whole lot of other sorts of things. But Dewey was very practical in a lot of his thinking. And so this idea of having library collections be the place where you can grow and promote ideas of social equity, I think is really important. And what you saw and what somebody else would have seen, you saw a bomb shelter, somebody else may have seen some sort of detention facility, to find out how different people's cultures influence what they see, I think is really helpful for other people to have access to.
Right, absolutely. And when you were thinking about the whole notion of culture, I was also thinking, and community, the notion of collections being local is also important. One of the things my high school students did, we used our AP students to collect oral histories at the end of, after the exam. And those still live in that library's collection, even though the librarian doesn't even know they're there. They're still there in the collection. So we interviewed community elders and we tagged that, and they're still in the catalog, I believe. So they were very useful. And when one of my colleagues' father died, I was able to say, "Hey, do you remember the interview we did with him?" And she was so touched that still lived, and it was still available for the community. But again, that's not something we would necessarily have thought of. And digitizing all those things in those little boxes can be a very valuable activity in your schools too. I don't know how many of us have pamphlet boxes filled with local treasures that are so dusty that we'd never touch them really unless they were digitized.
Yeah, yep. Your old vertical file is full of certainly relics of a particular time. I think of the Ann Arbor District Library invest a lot of time in digitizing old photos of just houses. And I've used that collection so many different times for so many different reasons. So yeah, I think that, but as you say, the digitization burden is significant. We get all these great ideas and then we have to make them happen.
Right, right. I've spent hours and hours scanning things that I volunteered to scan, and I was like, what was I thinking? But I know they made a difference long term. Well, I don't know, but I think so. Anyway, so what are the other big issues relating to collection? I don't want to keep you too long, but what are you thinking? And are there connections maybe between the shared foundations that we're beginning to take a look at and the notion of collection? Curation is one of our new shared foundations.
It is, and I have to tell you that was a shared foundation around which there was almost immediate agreement, and it was one of the shared foundations that really reinforced the need for that. And this isn't letting the cat out of the bag either. That the standards are built on 3 reinforcing frameworks: one for learners, one for school libraries, and that is aligned with the with well, they're called alignments for the school library, sort of what should be in there. And so the curation shared foundation really allowed us to see that that learners really need to be thinking about curation, thinking about how to separate, how to sort, how to organize for so many different reasons. But also simultaneous with that, the school librarian needs to be thinking about not only how to facilitate and create opportunities for students to build those skills and then help them understand why those skills are important, but also translate those higher level notions of curation and why it's important to their own practice. And then there are things that need to be in place in the school library to make both of those spheres of activity happen. So that was I think is an excellent example of why the reinforcing framework approach works. And but there was not really any hesitation on behalf of the editorial board, which consists of people with wildly different backgrounds, that changing the conversation from collection development to curation, which I think is pretty key, back to that earlier point of people worrying about building collections one ebook at a time. That's probably more in the collection development, the aggregation approach, whereas the curation approach is much more something in sync with what you were talking about having a vast collection of ebooks through which you can help people find their own ways. So I think I'm very anxious to see what the community reaction to that particular shared foundation is going to be. I'm really excited to see how people take it, run with it, and make it their own. So
yeah,
that's
when I looked at the shared foundations for the first time, I was thinking, of which ones overlap with the responsibilities of, or were, shared in the domains of our fellow educators, and which ones we really lead on our own. And of course, all of this we partner with the learning community on, but I feel like in this, there's a couple of others as well, but because we're talking about collection this week, curation really feels like one in which I've always felt I was leading the learning community in it, in the broadest of senses. And it meant, it's about the collection that we traditionally think of as library, and even the expanded notion of library collections, but also, as we roll out our one-to-one iPads, laptops, Chromebooks, if they're rolled out as hardware without any kind of curated content or without curated tools on them, then what good are they? And then, how do we help learners curate what they need to do the work that they need to do? And so, it becomes, I think it's as meaningful outside of the library as it is inside the library right now. So we're these teaching a curation strategy for personal knowledge management, for current awareness, for productivity, for workflow. All of those things reach well beyond the notion of curation of content or stuff.
Yeah, I think that things are starting to kind of shake out in terms of for what school librarians do. There's a strong modeling component and a strong mentoring component. And I think that perhaps the modeling component has been a little hidden from our ultimate beneficiaries, because they don't get to see how we make the decisions. They just get to see the results of our decisions. And I think that the activities that occur around curation, if those are more transparent and more talked about, even if it's just giving an example to a group of students about, well, this is how I made the choice between this and this and this, that can provide some pretty powerful examples that can set some good habits in place. And I think about your long-standing support for and my long-standing agreement with the idea of student work, collecting it, cataloging it, featuring it, talking about it in the school library. That is very powerful modeling that just translates not only into good information practices, but just sort of a nice way to empathize with individuals and show your connections as a community. So there's all these different ways. The collection is the currency. It really is not just what's going on, but the collection is the currency. Yeah, it's the thing that you have. It's the intellectual currency of the learning community.
And the term is exploded, and I think that's the point we're making tonight. That when you say the collection is the currency, you don't mean the books you select from the 5 vendors that you use or the jobber that you choose. It's not. It's a much broader concept than that.
Oh, I think so. And in fact, I feel as though it's almost unfair to my students that I don't break that down on a weekly basis for them, because for me, it changes and it expands on a weekly basis. The kinds of things we should be keeping track of and know how to find our ways to, and include as part of the information that we use to give something context and meaning. So that's the wonderful thing about being in the age that we are in, where information is increasingly available, but sometimes we just don't have the vocabulary that can keep up.
That's true, and our facility for doing this stuff keeps increasing. We're discovering that more and more we have the new tools, not only to make new collections in, but also to scale those collections across large communities. And share, with the community at home as well as at school. And this makes the librarian's work more tangible and visible too. Not everybody was going to come in and browse through your 900s, but the possibility for somebody to actually peek at the LibGuide that you may have curated for the science fair. People will see that, and people will see the depth of that and the professionalism involved in that kind of curation. So I find it a really exciting time. I've always found it an exciting time to be a librarian, but right now I think we have more and more opportunity. Jane, you've been kind of quiet. Any questions on your mind?
I've just been enjoying hearing the discussion. I did have something and it flew right out of my head. So move on.
One of the reasons I curate is because I keep forgetting if I don't immediately, and that's the other thing. Just like, I think when we curate or we make collections now, we have different ways we attack this. And as I was doing the research for the ALA book, people were describing that what collection development is not just, at the moment that you make the decision and you purchase, but we often have these kind of inboxes or staging areas. And oh my gosh, I know I'm going to need this. I don't know for what, but I need to put it in a bucket somewhere. because I know somebody's going to need it. And it's almost like, I don't even know what to call this. And then and then I'll discover it, and it needs to go here. It needs to go not only in a collection of tools to do this, but it needs to go on this lesson plan thing. And so, lately, Jane, because I think this has been going on in California more than anywhere else, the Hyperdoc girls, who I interviewed for one of our classes, really what they're doing is curating, but they're actually putting it together in a way that makes sense for classroom teachers more than anybody. And when I contacted them and I had a conversation about them, basically, hello, kitty. Is that a kitty or not?
No.
Dog?
It's a very needy little dog.
Yeah. Oh,
Cute. We're nearly done. I just wanted to say that I think that, one of the things I'm thinking is that these classroom teachers are doing this, and it's great. But the idea of us saying, hey, I see you're doing a Hyperdoc, let me connect with you, and I can help you with this. We can work on this as partners, and make it even richer. But I think that that's just one strategy that classroom teachers seem to be working on by themselves. And it may be because it started in California and there were so few librarians available for that thing to be a partner kind of project. But right now, I'm going to be sharing about that at the Tech and Learning Conference this week.
I do remember one comment I was going to make when you certainly sold me a long time ago on your collection is what you make discoverable. I do think as librarians, one of the things we need to work hard on is making, our good, like your good work that you do on LibGuides or whatever, making it available. I don't know if it's still true, but I was not in Los Angeles Unified School District, but that is near there, and that's one of the largest districts in the state. They, for years, have had a digital library of databases that are accessible only on campus.
Okay. So,
and I always thought, what a pity. And I go often when I want, and I hope I'm not going off on a tangent, when I want to know something about a library or a librarian, I will go to find their website so that I can see what are they curating, what lessons are they teaching, and sometimes you can find that, and sometimes you can't.
Right.
And I think it's such a lost opportunity not to make all the work, all the curating and the lessons and everything we're doing as public and accessible as possible. So I hope that wasn't going off on a tangent.
No, it's important. It's important. One thing that's happening in New Jersey and in some other states, but I don't think the larger part of our library community is aware of, is the notion of these databases being linked to with geolocation. So when you use the geolocation links, anybody in the state, no matter where they are, whether or not they have a library card, whether they're in school or at home, whether in the public library at home, as long as they have that link, can get into any of the databases. And that is brilliant. It costs a little bit of extra money for the state to do. But, I wonder why the databases are charging that extra money for that, because the taxpayers, in my mind, have the right to access everything the state's buying for them. And this is like, the fact that geolocation is a relatively new thing is shocking to me. And the fact that it's an add-on is a little shocking to me. I don't know how much work went into doing this. And the fact that there are states that have not made this available or not worked to make this available, like Pennsylvania, I find really surprising, because it is incredible. It is so hard to get into the databases here in Pennsylvania, especially because in Philadelphia, it's almost impossible because there are no school librarians in Philadelphia. There are only 4. So all of these kids in schools in Philadelphia can't get to the Access PA Power Library because nobody's pointing to it.
That the state is paying for.
Right? Paying for it. They are not paying for geolocation. So they have to have a library card to get in. That's a barrier, even though a lot of these kids have library cards. They're not taking them out of their pockets. They may not have them in their pockets. And so they don't bother with the databases. And there's some great stuff there. And if we had geolocation, we could put this on every school's website and just boom, make it, and as easy to get into as Google.
California still doesn't have statewide databases, which is
but most
very sad. Most of the public libraries do, and if a school like mine had a good relationship with the public library, I just treated those databases like they belonged to us.
Well,
And put them all over.
It wouldn't matter.
Yeah,
It's just
but the students, they still needed to have a login.
Nope, this would not be. They would not even need IP authentication.
Mm.
But anyway,
So we should all have that, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, why not? If they're taxpayers, if they're living in the state, they have, they deserve to have this. I'm not saying the library branding shouldn't be on it, but yeah. Anyway, let's start closing up, and let's give Marcia the closing, because I can go on and on about this stuff forever.
Oh, okay. Well, to wrap it all in a tidy package. That's a lot of pressure. This is a hard topic, as anybody who listened to this recording can tell, to treat as a standalone topic, because the collection is infused in absolutely everything you do in an information organization. It's something you take with you when you go to embed yourself in other environments. What I mean by your currency also is it's the thing that you have that you take with you everywhere. And when you need to speak to someone that you not quite sure you have something in common with, you don't know how to build a bridge to that person or that class of people, you can talk about the information resources and what they're interested in and how to bring those two things together. So it's your immediate sort of entree into a number of different situations. And that's just a very selfish use of the collection, but it's a way to inspire people also to come to you and to come to whichever information organization that structure that you sort of are the ambassador for.
I want to push back on that just briefly.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but it's not a static thing. So, when we, I used, and I want to actually just bring in the notion, because I haven't introduced it to my students yet, the notion of just in time versus just in case. And so at this point in time, I think when I was a librarian in the public library in the old days, I had a collection, and it would take me about 2 months to get something that somebody asked for, I would have things just in case people asked for it. Now I could almost get what they asked for overnight. So does it need to sit on the shelves as a just in case item? And can I be responsive to community needs and get things in a just in time kind of way when things shift? So my calling card, my identity is not just the stuff on the shelves or the stuff that's in the catalog, but my responsiveness to community needs and my engagement with the community.
That's right. You are the ambassador. And so you have to see yourself as part of that collection, as maybe the most important part of that collection, because as the person that is the sort of central hub for anticipating and responding to these requests, that's absolutely vital knowledge. And I think that when people build that relationship with you, then how it gets expressed through items you might buy or take them to or something like that, that's an important relationship to build. And I think to help people understand that they're not out there on their own in every single circumstance to figure out what kinds of information resources they might need is, I think, is a really good message to send. This morning I was near the public library locally here, and this is kind of a rural part of Tallahassee, which isn't particularly urban anyway, and I was surprised that there were a huge number of people. The library opened at 11 in the morning, which I think is a little bit strange, but okay. It was there must have been 30 adults, all not a homogenous group in any way, shape, or form. And I have a feeling they were all there to connect with the librarians in some way. I mean, I don't think everybody was there to use the Wi-Fi. People just seemed, there was something about going into that place that seemed to be important enough that they came early and lined up and waited. So it just struck me because I was surprised. But then when I really thought about it, I thought, well, let's hope they're here to get some information or be directed to some information from their information ambassador.
I believe that. And I'm seeing this in the entire, as ALA is getting involved in the community engagement efforts. The article that I think it was in Queens, New York, where the library was just bursting at the seams every 5 minutes because the huge immigrant population there was in there all the time. It was their lifeline. And there's so many stories we're seeing that are like that. And I think, as David Lenke says, it's not about the stuff. It's about the people who connect the community, right? It's the librarian, not the building. It's not the building, not the stuff. It's the person, and that person is making all of these decisions with community needs and community engagement in mind, and thinking about collection in a much bigger way. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm going on and on, but I just want to thank you, Marcia, and thank you, Jane, for visiting, and thank you, Cathy, who left a little earlier.
Yeah, what
I
happened?
texted her and she said that it crashed and the power went out.
Yeah,
Oh.
stuff happens.
So
But anyway, I'm going to stop the recording now, and thank you. If anybody has any last words, let me know before.
just thanks for including me. I just enjoyed sitting in.
Thank you both.
And
I second that.
to
Yeah.
see you, Marcia, and I look forward to seeing you at the ASL conference and hearing the new standards.
Yeah. November 6th, we're taking the sheet off, and then November, 8th or so, that Friday, what's that, the 10th or 9th or whatever?
I think the
Opening
9th.
session, I'll be there.